Have you ever wondered what would happen if an AI couldn't just compress data, but could actually imagine entirely new things? Think about it, generating incredibly realistic human faces, synthesizing human speech, or even designing life-saving molecules literally from scratch. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving deep into variational autoencoders, or VAEs, and we're going to see exactly how we went from simply shrinking files to actually teaching machines how to dream.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the leap from compression to imagination, then cover the probabilistic shift, tackle the reparameterization trick, learn about calculating the loss, take a peek inside the latent space, and wrap up with applications and limitations. Let's get right into it.
From compression to imagination, and the limits of traditional autoencoders. Okay, so before VAEs came along, a basic autoencoder worked in two straightforward parts. An encoder compresses an input into a hidden, latent representation, and then a decoder reconstructs it. Simple enough, right? The whole goal is just minimizing reconstruction error. But there's a massive limitation here. Traditional autoencoders learn deterministic, totally rigid mappings. It's kind of like a map where the autoencoder assigns an image to a single, rigid pushpin. It doesn't understand the underlying probability distribution at all, which makes it absolutely terrible at generating realistic new samples. Variational autoencoders fix this by being probabilistic. They create a smooth, continuous latent space rather than just a bunch of disconnected pushpins. Section 2. The probabilistic shift. Mapping to distributions. So, to generate new data, we absolutely need that smooth, continuous latent space. Let's walk through how a VAE pulls this off in 3 steps. Step 1. Unlike the traditional model, a VAE's encoder doesn't spit out a single vector. Instead, it outputs 2 things, a mean vector, mu, and a standard deviation vector, sigma. Together, these define a Gaussian distribution in the latent space. Think of it as a fuzzy cloud of probabilities, rather than a sharp, pointy pushpin. Step 2. From this fuzzy distribution cloud, we actively sample a latent vector. In step 3, this newly sampled vector is handed off to the decoder to reconstruct the input. This 1-2-3 pipeline is exactly what unlocks sampling and highly controlled generation.
Section 3. The reparameterization trick. Solving the randomness problem. Now you might be noticing a huge roadblock here. How do we backpropagate through randomness? If you've spent any time around neural networks, you know they rely heavily on backpropagation and gradient descent. They absolutely need to calculate a clear, mathematically differentiable path backward through the network to adjust their weights. But in step 2 of our pipeline, we just introduced sampling. We introduce pure randomness. And randomness fundamentally breaks backpropagation. You literally cannot calculate a gradient through a purely random node. So the million-dollar question is, if this model is broken by randomness, how on earth can it possibly learn?
Enter the hero of our story, the reparameterization trick. This is a brilliant mathematical workaround that deliberately separates the randomness from the network's core parameters. By isolating that random element, we restore the clear mathematical pathways the network desperately needs. It makes the entire model differentiable again, and therefore completely trainable via standard gradient descent. It's a real game changer. Let's break down exactly how this trick works. Instead of sampling our latent vector directly, we rewrite the process using a simplified formula. Z equals mu plus sigma times epsilon. Now, epsilon is just random noise sampled from a standard normal distribution. By structuring it this way, the randomness, the epsilon, is pushed totally off to the side as an independent input. The neural network itself, it only has to worry about adjusting the mean, mu, and the standard deviation, sigma. So the gradient can flow backward smoothly through mu and sigma, bypassing the random noise entirely. Honestly, it is an incredibly clever architectural hack. Section 4. Calculating the loss. Balancing the network. Okay, so a standard autoencoder only really cares about one thing. Did the output match the input? That's your standard reconstruction loss. But a VAE loss function relies on 2 vital balancing components. The total VAE loss equals the reconstruction loss plus the KL divergence loss. The reconstruction component still measures how perfectly the output matches the input, but the KL divergence component measures something entirely different. It measures how close our learned distribution is to a standard normal distribution, and we have to balance these 2 competing interests. Think about it. If we only had reconstruction loss, the network would just cheat. It would turn our nice fuzzy probability clouds back into tiny, rigid, deterministic points just to get a perfect score, and that would completely ruin our ability to generate new things.
Let's focus on that second half for a moment. KL Divergence acts as a powerful regularizer. It actively forces the latent space to be continuous and to neatly follow a known distribution. Without this regularizing force, the latent space would become wildly chaotic. The clouds of data would spread infinitely far apart, leaving these massive, unusable dead zones in between them. If you tried to sample a point from one of those dead zones, the decoder would just output absolute garbage. So, KL Divergence steps in and neatly packs all the distributions close together, centering them nicely around zero. This ensures that the entire latent space is usable for generating completely new data. Section 5. Inside the latent space. Visualizing the result.
And this right here is the beautiful payoff of all that math. Nearby points in the latent space actually equals similar outputs. Because of our continuous Gaussian distributions and our KL divergence packing everything together so nicely, the latent space acts a lot like a continuous heat zone on a map. For example, if you decode a specific point and it gives you an image of a smiling face, and then you mathematically move just a tiny bit to the left in that space, you don't get random static. You get a slightly different face, maybe one that's smiling just a little bit less. This allows for beautifully smooth transitions and interpolations between entirely different classes of data.
Section 6. Applications and limitations. VAEs in the real world. Because VAEs offer such incredibly meaningful representation learning, they're being used everywhere across the industry today. We have image generation, of course, but there's also anomaly detection. Because you see, if a VAE really struggles to reconstruct a piece of data, it can flag it as highly unusual. They're used in advanced data compression. They're fundamentally changing the game in drug design and molecule design, allowing scientists to smoothly interpolate between molecular structures to find brand new chemical properties. And they're even deeply embedded in speech synthesis. Truly, mastering VAEs opens the door to the whole shebang of modern generative AI.
Now, you might be asking, how do VAEs compare to the other massive player in this space, GANs? Well, it's a classic engineering trade-off. VAEs provide incredibly stable training and an explicit probabilistic foundation, but their outputs do tend to be slightly blurrier because they average things out to minimize error. GANs, on the other hand, are kind of the temperamental divas of the AI world. They produce incredibly sharp, crisp outputs, but they are notoriously volatile to train, and they have absolutely no explicit latent distribution that you can smoothly navigate. So each architecture really brings its own clear strengths depending on the specific application you're building for.
And keeping things completely objective here, we do have to acknowledge the limitations of the VAE architecture itself. Despite all their massive advantages, generated samples can indeed be blurry. Furthermore, our entire math foundation relies on the assumption of a Gaussian latent space, which, let's be honest, might not always hold true for extremely complex datasets. Finally, there's a constant, really delicate trade-off between reconstruction quality and regularization. If you lean too hard on the KL divergence, your generated images lose detail. But if you lean too hard on reconstruction loss, you lose your ability to generate altogether.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today and leaves us with an exciting question. Where will your understanding of generative AI go next? Will you explore conditional VAEs, where you can actually dictate the specific class you want to generate? Will you dive into beta VAEs, which let you untangle the variables so that one specific node controls, say, the rotation of a face, while another completely separate node controls the lighting? Or are you ready to jump straight into a Python implementation and code this whole thing yourself? The probabilistic foundation you've learned today is the key to all of it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on variational autoencoders. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.